Well, here we are, another stop on the journey to finding hope, inspiration, and positivity in this crazy world we all live in. You are listening to Changing the Perspective podcast. If you are watching this on YouTube, please subscribe to our channel and like this video below. If you are listening on a podcast service, please like our podcast on your preferred service. No matter how you choose to hear this interview, we are grateful you are following us on this journey. Hey everyone, welcome back for another episode of Changing the Perspective. Today, I have one of my friends from like 20 plus years ago now, which we hate to admit. But
Right.
Ryan and I actually went to school together. High school, he was the basketball player, I was the cheerleader. Didn't necessarily hang out in the same circles all the time, but we definitely had classes together, knew each other, all of that. So I was excited when he said he was writing a book and had a story to tell. And so I reached out. I was like, hey, let's do this. And so thank you for agreeing to be on.
Thank you. I've listened to some of your guys' podcasts. They're awesome. So I appreciate
Thank
the
you.
opportunity.
I appreciate that for sure. This has definitely been a journey in the podcast world, but something that's been fun. I'm learning a lot. So it's been good.
Awesome.
Well, catch us up. What's going on? Where has this started for you?
Yeah. So my journey, my path, as you mentioned, I was a basketball player and good enough that I had a full scholarship to play basketball at the Division II level, a school about 30 minutes away from where we were in high school, Southwest Baptist University. So I played there for a few years and got directly into coaching at the collegiate level. So junior college for 5 years and then Division II for 6. And I don't say this to brag, but it's part of my story. I was a really successful player, coach. My jersey is retired at high school, as you know, and then at college, I was top 5 in every statistical category. Every coaching stop I had along the way, we had record-setting success, but none of it was ever enough. And one day, everything kind of came to a head when it was my 34th birthday. My wife at the time, we're no longer together. We found out we were going to have our first and my only child. And then I was coaching a game that day that we won by double digits. And I was still drinking at home by myself and frustrated, didn't really know why. I had all these positive things in my life, successful things. But as I mentioned, it wasn't enough. So I went in and resigned the next day, told the coach I was done. Had no idea what I was going to do. Obviously, with a pregnant wife, that's not the easiest conversation to have. So then we hopped around a little bit. I got into mindfulness, meditation, teaching yoga, and that really changed my life. But even then, and we'll dive into some of these questions, I know here as we go, but even as I started to find meditation and yoga, which I now teach and then do coaching with athletes, coaches, all that stuff in and around the sports world, I was still imbalanced. And I was living essentially this double life that again kind of came to a head last summer. COVID had a lot to do with it, a bunch of relationship stuff, all things that we'll dive into. But that caused me to look at my relationship with alcohol, which I had to step away from. And then I ended up writing a book to my son in daily letters as I stopped drinking and got my life back on track, which leads us to today. So that book's coming out. Yeah, we're doing a documentary about it. So a lot of cool stuff has happened in this journey, in these waves in my life. But that's a fast forward version of the last 20 years or so.
Yeah,
as you
that's
mentioned.
good. I like it. So talk about like, what are some of the things you experienced when you were kind of in the alcohol world, but then also getting out, like you had to experience this transition really. So talk about that some.
Yeah. So what it was for me, I actually, in the end, I was drinking less than I was when I was in my coaching days. So it wasn't the amount necessarily. It was that I was drinking no longer to feel. So it became an escape. Even when I was happy, I would drink to celebrate. When I was sad, I would drink to not feel. And so that's when it really became kind of a warning sign for me. And through a lot of the research reflection that I've done on it, it was really just a lack of self-love. And this goes back to the nothing ever being good enough for me,
Yeah.
which is hard in athletics, in and around the athletic space, because you're taught to quite literally think and act that way.
Yeah.
When you win, it's not good enough. When you
Yeah.
lose, obviously that's not good enough. So a lot of that was carrying into my life. And then as I transitioned out of athletics, kind of lost my identity. It was a combination of all these things, divorce, that were still affecting my life, and alcohol became my coping mechanism. So while
Yeah.
I was drinking less in the end, I was now drinking to not feel, to not think, to just keep kicking the can down the road, so that I wasn't having to process a lot of these emotions, and give myself that love, that grace that I found when I stopped. And so yeah, long-winded answer to your question. It was really hard, a really difficult journey, especially initially when I stopped. I was so used to having that crutch. And in my case, it was alcohol, but it's different for
Oh
a
yeah.
lot of us. For some people, it's smoking weed. For some people, it's video games. Shopping, their
Right.
work. That habit that we all have, that we use as our crutch to not feel, to not think. It's
Yeah.
different for us all, but it was alcohol for me, and
Yeah.
and so getting away from it was challenging. But ultimately, I feel incredible now, and
Yeah.
I'm so glad I did it. It just took a long, winding path to get there.
Right. How long have you been sober?
Um, let's see. I stopped in August of last year, but I
Okay.
do want to be totally upfront. I don't identify as an alcoholic or an
Right.
addict. I have drank since then on my 40th birthday, and so I do want to be open and honest
Yeah.
with everyone. And the path for me was different than most people that have some type of habit or addiction. The real light switch for me that went off was a book called This Naked Mind, that actually talks a lot about how alcohol's the most addictive and harmful drug of all drugs by far. And so
Yeah.
for me, my process was more understanding the science of how damaging alcohol was for your mind and body. And once I had that, and the switch went off, when I actually did have a drink on my 40th birthday, I just it was gone. I had no desire to do it. I
Yeah.
still don't have any desire to do it, which has been really refreshing. And that was
Yeah.
what I was really looking for with my meditation and mindfulness practice. I didn't want to have like a strong aversion to anything. I didn't want to have a strong craving for anything. So I chose a bit of a different path.
Yeah.
But in answer to your question, I stopped in August of 2020, I guess it would have been.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
When
coming up.
other people were picking up the habit because of the pandemic, you were you were dropping it off.
Yeah, so here's you asked about my story. The last year for me, so in February I was in ICU. Part of that was alcohol related. I had a small tear in my throat, was throwing up blood, lost half
Yeah.
the blood in my body. My girlfriend at the time and I lost a child together. She lost the baby was only 5 or 6 weeks along, but that happened in March. So I was in the hospital in February. That happened in March. Um, COVID hit, so we're in the
Yeah.
middle of COVID, everybody's isolated. And then, yeah, in August. So that was about like 4 or 5 months in a row. It was just bang, bang, bang.
Yeah.
And I know this podcast is ultimately about transitioning from your difficult times in the positive light.
Right.
And really the overarching theme for me, for all of that, it was going to take all of that
Mhm.
really terrible stuff that happened in my past, and then even leading into this past year. I was going to have to go through all of that before I bottom out and eventually make the changes that I
Yeah.
had to make.
Yeah.
So without going through all those experiences, especially bang, 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 when the pandemic hit, I was never going to be like, enough's enough. It had to happen in the exact way it happened. So while it's difficult to go through, I'm thankful it played out the way it did.
I feel like it's the athlete part of us because we've been taught, I mean, throughout most of our life was it hurts, suck it up.
Yeah.
You didn't do well, suck it up. Oh,
Yeah.
you were successful. Great. Keep working. Like
For
that
sure.
is how that was our life. I mean, I went through a horrible abusive relationship and stayed in it. And part of me
Yeah.
thinks like in my mind, I'm like, just suck it up. Just
Yeah.
suck it up. Like this is what you're supposed to be doing. And I had to learn some very tough lessons as well. And I think when you have that mind, it takes a lot to throw
Yeah.
you out of it. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I
Great
hear you.
point. Well, and you bring up a couple good points in that never give up as an athlete, right? Which
Yeah.
even if something's broken or terrible, you're never supposed to give up. You're
Right.
supposed to be robotic. You're not supposed to feel.
Yeah.
So we're taught to shut down difficult emotions, be averse, be numb.
Right.
So yeah, a lot of the lessons I've learned now around self-love and like you said, understanding yourself, understanding what a healthy relationship is.
Yeah.
Um, we don't really know because we're not allowed to as
Yeah.
athletes.
Yeah.
And so a big part of writing this book and the healing process for me was honestly raising my self-awareness in those areas, practicing self-love, and then the biggest part was acceptance and letting a lot of that stuff go,
Yeah.
so that I could move on from it, from past relationships, athletics, alcohol. A lot of it was just writing it down, journaling it so that I could let it go and move
Yeah.
on from it. Because you're right, a lot of those lessons that we've been taught and learned, especially as athletes, are so unhealthy, unbalanced, but ultimately they have no effect on us now and how we move forward as long as we understand them, we process them, and then we
Yeah.
move on from them in a healthy way. But
Yeah.
that's tough.
So I am raising the D2 athlete. He's full ride baseball at
Nice.
Missouri Southern. So he's in this now.
Okay.
And it kills me because,
Sigh of
you know,
frustration.
they strike out and they're not supposed to show the emotion at the plate. You just walk
Yeah.
in and you move on for the next thing. But then after the game, I mean, he's just drained. Like you can see
Yeah.
it. And so I'm in this struggle now going like, how do I help his mind? Why he's still succeeding at the college level? Cause that's what's paying for his college. Like that is,
Yeah. Yeah.
so we're
How
still
do you help his mind? Well, it is a balance, and I write about this a lot. In that, you know, when we hear the term right path, we often think that means correct or incorrect,
yeah.
and it actually means more like a ship, and that we have to right the ship in order to. Sometimes it takes corrections to the right, to the left, but our journey is actually more of one that wobbles as opposed to turn right or turn left.
Yeah.
Um, so for him, especially as athletes, there is going to be a balance there in showing emotion and being frustrated, slamming your helmet
Hmm.
versus bottling it all up and never showing anything. And and yeah, you're both going to have to figure that out. You as a mom and having those conversations with him, and then him as an athlete. There's,
Yeah.
I was never a raw guy. I led by example in how hard I played and how physical I was. And you can lead that way too. But
Yeah.
the same for your son. There's going to be times where he needs to show emotion in a controlled way if he can, and then there's other times where
Yeah.
less is going to be more. But he's got to find that right balance, that right path for him.
Well, I question if I maybe did the detriment in high school. He slammed his bat one time and that equipment's expensive. And I'm like, no, no, no. You break that bat, like,
Yeah.
oh, buddy. you know, so I probably somewhat squashed that for him.
Yeah.
So
That release.
I'll take some blame there. Well, and he was a very emotional player. He didn't let innings go very well. And
Yeah.
so I kind of got to this point with him where I said, look, let the inning go. And when we
Yeah.
get in the car, you can cuss, scream, yell, hit the back of the seat. I don't even care. But I
Yeah.
think what you'll find is by the time the game is over, that first inning that you struck out isn't going to matter because you just had 8 more innings that had other things.
Yeah.
And I, good or bad, I don't
Yeah.
know, but here we
Oh,
are
that's
now.
good.
So
That's good. We actually have a meditation in the Mind Sport app, that helps athletes and coaches and even parents. We have a youth series too. But one of our meditations is uses the acronym BALL, which just talks about breathe. First time, take a breath. Maybe you've got your ball or your bat, whatever sport you're in. but I bring this up because the second one's always acknowledge, acknowledge what you're feeling, what you're thinking. If you're tight, if you're feeling tightness in your
Yeah.
chest, a lot of times when we're angry or frustrated, our body warms up naturally. So you can start to observe and acknowledge how you feel. Listen to that so that you can understand the experience, kind of like what you're referring to with your
Yeah.
son. And then the last L is learn. When you learn from that whole cycle, the learning piece is, did it serve you well? So whatever, the first three pieces of it ended up, whatever the result is, you got to learn from that and say, do I want to repeat that behavior? Did it,
Yeah.
did it serve me well, or
Yeah.
was it detrimental for me? And I say that because sometimes, whatever the athlete's reaction is, whether it's slamming a helmet or throwing some dirt down, sometimes getting that out can do them justice.
Mhm.
Sometimes it can be a setback, but it's all
Yeah.
part of the learning process for
Yeah. And he's mouthy. Usually he just mouths.
him.
So,
Where does he
well,
get that from? His mom, or?
oh, probably. Although I will say his dad is like that blow and go type. He gets really mad, but then he is over it. Like, just
Yeah,
we're good. And so
yeah.
it's probably a mix. He's got the sarcastic thing for me for sure. And so when we get together, sometimes you think we're fighting, like the way we interact. And my mom will go, stop. And I'm like, oh no, this is a good conversation.
Right. This
So
is healthy.
it's
Yeah.
fine. So your son, how have you managed? Obviously, you wrote this book kind of for him a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, so he's driving some of your decisions. So how are
Right.
you handling him with all of this stuff?
Yeah, he's four, for the listeners and viewers. But what happened as I was transitioning away from alcohol was I was had all this energy, and I didn't know how to release it.
Yeah.
And you have all these thoughts, monkey mind as it's called in the meditation world. But I was like, man, I've got to do something. So I started writing down essentially what I was thinking and feeling every day, and it would just flow out of me like 1,000, 1,500, sometimes 2,000 words in a day. And um and I didn't know what I was going to do with it.
Yeah.
Well, then I started to think about, well, I need to turn these lessons I'm thinking and feeling into something helpful. And then it also became apparent that athletics was a big part of, again, what I was thinking and feeling, past relationships. So I tied all that together, and yeah, started writing letters to my son. That what the letters do within the book, each day is essentially a chapter of the first 30 days. And
Mm.
um, my big takeaway from the day, uh, I let him know what I learned, and then I weave it back into a story starting in my athletic career, kind of like what Forrest Gump did, where I start young.
Yeah.
So like day one, I flash back to when I'm 5 years old, and my first athletic story, which is I lose a coin toss when I was five to in like a soccer game, and I start bawling, thinking the
Yeah.
world's gonna end. And I talk about how I couldn't control my emotions then, and I can't control my emotions now because it's day one of me
Full
being
circle.
sober. Yeah. Um, so I weave stories like that,
Okay.
but in answer to your question, with in regards to my son, it's actually been really uh, really helpful, really healing for me. Um, and even though he's as young as he is, to write all that, to get it to him, and then I started coaching him. Ironically, I coached his basketball team this past winter, and so that was really cool too, because it was right as I had finished the book, and I had talked about this unhealthy relationship with athletics, and then I got to coach him, and even though he's four, it was 4, 5, and 6 year olds, essentially kindergartners, and even that, it taught me an incredible amount in that understanding emotions, how much you talked about your parenting a little bit and how it affects your relationship, how much the parent impacts the child, how they act, how they behave, how they perform, even at that level.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, every day he affects me, in some way, teaches me something. And it's amazing, once you're a parent, it's hard to explain, but you're always learning, always evolving, and
Yeah.
they're always impacting you in these incredible ways. And even on the frustrating days, where you're pulling your hair out or gritting your teeth or
Mhm.
cussing or whatever.
Yeah.
You're always learning something,
Mhm.
something positive, something negative, kind of like
Yeah.
that balance I was talking about.
Yeah. You posted a video of him meditating.
Yeah.
I thought that was awesome. So is he doing that with like regularly with you?
Yeah. So what we do with that, he's so young that I usually just call it, breathing or breath work. But yeah, we do 10 breaths is our big thing with him, because if you do 10 breaths, 3-second inhales, 3-second exhales, that equals a minute. And then obviously a minute long meditation at that age is really good.
Right.
So that's a big thing I do with him, especially when he gets frustrated, is 10 breaths. And his teachers, he goes to, school during the day, and his teachers love that. Um, but yeah, he loves to do breath work. He loves to do yoga. I've gone to his
Mhm.
school back pre-COVID and done some yoga stuff with him.
Yeah.
That's always a ride. He can already do like down dog and child's pose, and he'll do like a high crescent or warrior A, some yoga poses.
That's
So he
awesome.
loves it. But yeah, I'm
Yeah.
always trying to find ways to blend in. So tying this all together with the athletic piece, it was amazing as I went through yoga and meditation, learning how disconnected I was with my body, which you would
Yeah.
think as an athlete, it's the opposite. But
Mhm.
since we are taught to be so robotic, I had no idea how to connect like my mind with my body and my breath with my body. I was always just, worried about the physical, and I never really tied the two together. You hear like mental toughness and all that, but for the most part, actually what that is as athletes is you're just not feeling, you're
Mhm.
shutting your mind off. And that has its positives and negatives, but I had never really connected the two. And yeah, mindfulness, meditation, just breathing
Yeah.
has taught me so much for myself. And now I'm passing that on to my son.
Yeah, I think it's awesome. I would have never pinned you for the yoga person today.
I get that a lot. You should have seen me like 10 years ago. You'd say that even more. I was like the middle of the um, like drink insane amounts of alcohol and yeah, all kinds of right. The stereotypical male.
Yeah.
So it's been quite the transition these past years for sure.
Yeah, I just remember, I don't know, it may have been a couple years ago, and you post something about a workshop you did or whatever, and you're in this
Yeah.
yoga pose, and I was like, "Really?" Like,
Yeah.
I wonder which girl talked him into this.
I still get that. Well, so you'll actually appreciate this. It was my ex-wife. And what happened was my body was just beat up. It was broke
Yeah,
down. And I was so tired of lifting and running and all those things I had done for 20 years.
yeah,
And so we had a membership at Lifetime, and she's like, you should try yoga. So I did. And the first time it sucked. I hated it.
yeah,
And then I was like, I'll try it one more time. And the second time I went, I had this teacher that was incredible, and the switch got flipped. And
okay,
I'd been into meditation for a while, for about a year at that point. So it was actually it aligned a little more than you would think because of the meditation piece.
yeah.
But you're right. If you took meditation away and you're just like Ryan, the high school guy, the college guy, transitioning to the yoga world, yeah, that would not have aligned for
Yeah,
sure.
no, it really was a little shocking, honestly. So, all right. So, tell me about this kind of mindfulness thing that you do with athletes and your coaching
Yeah.
and all of that.
Yeah. So the biggest thing, and I've heard some of your other guests talk about coaching that they do, and
Hmm.
life coaching's a really big profession in general now.
Right.
But what I do is I align the Mind Sport app, mindfulness, meditation, yoga, and then I also blend it with some life coaching experiences. So as I was transitioning, I went through leadership training, executive coaching. I got certified in disc behavior assessments through a former Olympic athlete. So I had this very eclectic blend of skills,
Yeah.
everything from behavior assessments, understanding how we communicate, why we're motivated, um, executive coaching using the Socratic method, and then obviously my background in and around athletics. And then I did a year-long intensive practice program with meditation through UCLA. And so what I found was I could blend all these skills together and make it a really powerful program for our athletes and coaches and really anyone in and around sport. It doesn't have to be a high level professional athlete
Yeah.
for your listeners. But what I do is I essentially take what would be like a life coach and executive coach, and I blend that with mindfulness, meditation, and yoga. And I teach athletes how to quiet the mind, deal with anxiety and stress, deal with failure, and then also understand who they are, through self-love, through communication, through their motivations. So raising their self-awareness level, and then also helping them understand that mind-body connection that I was talking about.
Yeah. And they get you on, I guess it's an app, but you have a
Yeah.
website as well.
Yeah. So there's a couple different ways that we can blend the pieces together. The app's the most like scalable version of me. That's why I started the app. As I was starting to do better and better professionally, you obviously, there's only one of you for all of us, so we
Right.
had to find a way to scale some of the programs, and that's how MindSport came about. Was as I was working with these clients, they wanted to make it more scalable so that parents could have access to it, their athletes,
Yeah.
teams. So yeah, MindSport's where it all starts, and then from that piece, if they want to dive deeper, my personal website is amryanstock. um, and there they can find out about the book. There's executive coaching programs on there that are less intensive to as deep a dive as they want to go down. But the Am Ryan Stock piece of it is where they can find out the more intimate one-on-one work, or anything on social media. Just hit me up, DM. I'm an open book, quite literally.
Yeah.
And so if they've ever got questions or want to hit me up on social media, I'll always respond and help any way I can, whether that's surface level, just answering some basic questions they have, or a really deep, impactful, and an intimate dive they want to do in their life.
Yeah. So what is the name of the book?
So the book is called One Last Drop, and it blends athletics, alcohol, and love, and how I realized that all three of those pieces in my life, it was an unhealthy relationship with all three aspects. And so um, it's like, the way I describe it's a Forrest Gump like tale of the first 30 days after I stopped drinking, and it's pretty jaw dropping. It's really raw and vulnerable. Um, Everybody that reads it, you pretty much can't put down the first 30 pages. And I don't say that to brag, but the stories I start the book with that lead to me stopping,
Mhm.
um, it's pretty. It's like watching a car crash or something, and then you get to day one where I bottom out and I start to rebuild, and it makes sense from there. But those first few pages especially are really gripping, really really intense, really impactful.
Yeah.
But I know it'll help a ton of people and change
Yeah.
a lot of lives.
So, did you think coming out of high school that you would ever be so vulnerable that you would write a book about every failure you've had?
Well, this is interesting because I'll kick this back to you, because we always have this perspective of ourselves.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to hear what your and the clique you hang out with was. I thought that I was a pretty quiet guy. Some people thought I was like standoffish or
Yeah.
like cocky because I was the athlete, but actually it was the opposite. I was shy, and I wasn't a real social guy unless I was drinking.
Yes. Yeah.
But so because of that, I was never like a big talker. I was never like a real social butterfly guy. I wasn't the life of the party by any means. But I don't know, what did you think about what I was in high school versus what I've ended up?
Yeah. So, I would say you were quiet. So, I wasn't in the most popular clique. I wasn't in the worst. I was like middle of the road all the way around. So, I had great friends in the super popular thing, and I had great friends in the not popular thing. I literally went middle of the road. So,
Yeah.
I will say the few parties I attended with you, you were a different person. I will say that. That is true.
Interesting. Yeah.
But yeah, I actually did view you as like the quiet one of the group you were with.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, and so I would agree with that. Although that also to me meant closed off, and like
Yeah.
you weren't going to be vulnerable because like it's so private and this is you, and don't.
Yeah, that's a good point. And so in answer to that question, that's actually good awareness and a good point by you, and that I was so removed, and um, so anti
Yeah.
emotions and feelings that and I wonder, now you got me thinking about it. That's a good question. When that really flipped for me, because even when I was coaching, I was still pretty close to the vest. And I
Mhm.
mean, I would be honest with guys. I've always been good about that in relationships. Even back to when I was quiet, I was always honest.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't volunteer a lot of information. So that's just
Mhm.
happened since I've gotten into the yoga and meditation side of things. So
Yeah.
probably the last probably 7 or 8 years here.
Do you wish you would have started that younger?
Um, See, I always hesitate on wishing, and I write about this a couple of times in the book. I think everything that happened in my life happened exactly how it was supposed to happen. And I don't think that if I would have been as open and honest as I am now, that my life experience would have resulted in the path that I'm on. So I think
True.
everything in my life has happened, exactly the way it was supposed to. Like one of the examples I use in the book was, for a long time, I beat myself up over like athletic experiences and all these things. And one example I used was Oklahoma State wanted me to walk on there as an invited walk on, which, those high major BCS type
Mhm.
schools, you don't just go walk on there. They take really high level players and they ask them to walk on, usually redshirt and then scholarship after. And forever I was kicking myself that I didn't do it. Well, um, what would have been my freshman year after my redshirt year, there was a plane crash where like all the walk-on athletes died in the plane crash. And so
Mhm.
that's just one example of a story of like, this butterfly effect essentially uh, of what happens in your life. And I think that happens to all of us, where we want to reflect back on, what could have been or what we do differently, when in reality, I think all the experiences lead us exactly where we're supposed to be. And
Yeah. Yeah.
so the one last drop, it signifies two different pieces. Obviously, the alcohol piece, but it also signifies when a drop hits, the ripple effects that happens
Mhm.
from a drop of water. And um, so, not to get too profound in the question you asked,
It's fine.
I think I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. So I think the path that I ended up taking's led me right where I was supposed
That's
to
good.
supposed to go.
I like it. Are they going to be able to find your book on Amazon?
Yeah, so it'll be, especially initially, it'll be on Amazon. I think we're going to do some exclusive thing just for Amazon. Actually, we're talking with them about. They've got this program that you can do, but yeah, certainly for Amazon, and then eventually within the first month or two, it'll be
Mm.
everywhere books are sold. But
Okay.
yeah, Amazon for sure out of the gate.
Perfect. We will make sure we link all that stuff to the description of this video so everybody can find it, because everybody needs to be able to just easily click on it and buy your book.
Yeah, thanks so much. I appreciate that, and I appreciate you.
Yeah. Any advice you want to give before we part?
Um, Reflection wise, the biggest thing for me, um, is and will continue to be self love, and that's easier to say than it is to do. I can attest to that as much as anyone. But for anyone that's feeling some type of way, frustrated, angry, depressed, start with love, and start with self love. Um, the story that starts very early on in the book was I went to a therapist as I was trying to get right, and she told me that same thing. She was like, "Can you start with loving yourself?" And I said no. That I had ruined a relationship. I was failing business wise. I was doing all these things, and I didn't feel like I could love myself. And what I learned in the healing and the writing and all that is that's where everything starts. So my tip would be for everyone to start there too. That I know it can be frustrating as hell, and you may not feel like you deserve it. But if you're going through something, you've got lots of people that love you, even though it may not feel that way. And ultimately, you need to start by figuring out a few pieces that you can love about yourself, and then
Yeah.
it'll all start to build from there.
I like it. I actually had someone tell me you can't love your neighbor if you can't love yourself. So,
Yeah,
all
yeah,
relationships, that's kind of the way you can totally damage a relationship all on your own.
yeah. Well, and the other unique part for me was always I was so focused on helping other people heal and being so kind to others, but I was talking to myself in a way that I would never talk to anyone else. And I think we can all do that so often, is speak to ourselves and think about ourselves in ways that we would never say or do to anyone else. Like if someone said to us what we say to us, we'd be like, hey,
Yeah.
and jump all over them, but we'll quickly talk to ourselves that way. And
Yeah.
that's something we've got to be conscious of and try and heal.
That's the hardest part, forgiving yourself for all the crap that you're beating yourself up for.
Yeah, from parenting to relationships to
Yeah.
profession, absolutely, is have that love, have that
Love that.
acceptance, and then release, for
Yeah,
sure.
I love it. Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us and being able to catch up with you and actually like in voice, not just social media. So,
Right, not just
uh,
likes.
it's always nice to catch up with someone. So I appreciate you. For all those people watching, if you're on YouTube, like our channel, subscribe, like this video, comment, leave Ryan a comment. I'll make sure he gets to see all of those.
Yeah.
And if you're on your podcast service, just make sure to favorite our thing on your podcast service. And for all those people, we appreciate you. And I hope you had a great week. Have a wonderful weekend. We'll catch you all later. Bye.